Hey Luis, how's it going?
Hey, hi Alex. Great to see you again.
Man, so good to see you. I'm so excited about this podcast. When I learned that you were going to join it, I was really excited. I remember last year meeting you for the first time at the event in Amsterdam, and your
Yes.
talk was so inspiring. I think there's so much thing that you can teach industry. Your passion is so strong about experimentation. I'm
Mhm.
so excited about this episode. So thank you so much for joining us. I think my first question is how did you get to into experimentation? Was it the first thing you wanted to do in life, or how did you get to it?
Uh, no, actually, it's so maybe telling you a bit my background story. I started as a software engineer many years ago already, almost 20 years ago, and then very quickly I actually started to try to understand how the things that I was building were perceived and used by our users, the clients. At the time, I was working at an agency, so working for clients directly, and one of the things that I noticed was yes, definitely trying to understand from a usability perspective what they were doing, how they were using things, and how we could build better solutions for them was definitely a groundbreaking moment. That was what led me to actually start looking into usability. Actually was for me one of the key components that I still bring on my baggage. How to learn from users, how to interact, how to question them, how to listen to them, and that's for me one of the most important things. um, then there was a shift on my career that I think it was also quite important because I onboarded the crazy world of startups more than just building one. Actually, I was part of a company builder, so a startup of startups, and that also helped me to actually have a much wider perspective because I was not just helping to build one product, I was also helping all the others, taking the learnings that we got from each other, and to use that to actually accelerate the learnings from all the others. At the time, I was still, and by title, a CTO, let's call it that way.
Yeah,
So I was helping from an engineering perspective, but that was also the moment that I was actually being on a startup. I was highly involved on everything, and we had to actually prove the value of something from an engineering perspective, but also from a market perspective. We had to validate product market fit, and at the same time trying to understand the users in the way that they were perceiving such a proposition, value proposition. So very engaged with also the business side of things and making it from a sustainable perspective, financially, but also in interest from the users in terms of growth and engagement. And at some point, I realized, wow, what I'm doing is not necessarily what I was doing before, which was just delivering solutions to the clients. I was actually building something that at some point when I was reading a lot, I was like, well, this is product. So actually, I'm acting as a product manager and actually applying many of the principles here. So that was the shift on my career towards product management. It was also triggered when I actually joined one of the actual startups that I was pitching and helping, because I felt so passionate about it. Actually, it was called Maily, the first email communication tool for kids. It was really interesting. I can go there if you want. Like so many learnings about how to interact with not adults, which have a short attention span, but imagine with kids of 3 to 9, where the attention span is like 10 seconds max to get any type of user research with them. So, and it was so insightful. And that was also the moment that I actually embraced from a professional and career perspective to be a product manager. What I was doing right from the beginning was exactly working and doing this iterative process that from the early start I looked at it as experimentation, but I was not yet the expert in experimentation as I'm probably my title says that I am right now. That became basically when I on one of those, then I shifted a couple of other startups, and one of those startups actually became part of Farfetch. We got acquired by Farfetch, where I am currently. And here at Farfetch, where I've been for the past 6 years and a half, I've been always working as a lead from the on product management. But now, more recently, or more recently, already recently, almost 4 years ago, I actually took the challenge, or actually I created the challenge inside the provocation inside the company to say, what we need is a different way on how we are doing experimentation. We need to do it in a way that it's actually in a more centralized way. We were in a hyper growth stage at the company. So even if we were doing experimentation since moment zero, and that has something that actually was one of the triggers for me to join the company, was exactly that. We were doing it at the beginning in a very ad hoc way, very centralized way. Each team was doing it in their own way, using their own tools. And then we start seeing when we started grow the company, when I joined, for you to have a perspective of size, I was the employee 700 worldwide, and now we are more than 6,000. So imagine the growth. Of course, there was a moment when we start growing that doing experimentation in the way that we were doing it before didn't work. We started
Yeah.
seeing that basically many mushrooms started to bubble up along the different areas of the company, different countries, different offices. So I proposed to the company, okay, we need to do this in a different way. We need to do this in a way that actually it's scalable, where we can leverage all the knowledge that we are getting from the different areas, and that we have a center of excellence. So basically, I proposed that, and then I realized, which was interesting, after reading like the books from Experimentation Works, etc., where these models actually had a name, but I was already trying to apply it because it was what made sense for me at the
Yeah.
moment. And yeah, that's where I am now. Right now, I'm basically the lead for the experimentation area, center of excellence for Farfetch, and also managing and creating our own experimentation platform that we use internally entirely. So, and we can discuss about the platform for sure,
Yeah.
because there was a bit of a shift between using third parties, using or investing on our own
Yeah.
platform, which is where we are right now. But yeah, that's basically a bit longer than what I was actually expecting. But yeah,
That's
telling you
cool.
a
This
bit
is this
about
is your story. Something that I really like is that you didn't. I mean, many people in our industry, especially in experimentation, start with maybe marketing or running some small A/B test, and then they grow into experimentation. It's very interesting. You started with business experimentation, basically,
Yes.
right? Doing that with startup. Do you see a big difference between business experimentation and A/B test? And do you feel like the companies that are doing A/B testing, do you think they do enough of business experimentation?
Really good question. Because for me, in terms of mindset, in terms of way of thinking, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. What happens is that for most people, when they look at A/B testing and all those types of tools, that they are just tools. And for me, experimentation is much more than that. It's a mindset. It's a way of doing things. So most people, when they look at A/B testing, they see it as exactly that, purely a tool that probably will drive quick wins in terms of conversion rate optimization. And that's
Yeah.
why most of the experts in the field, they even call themselves CRO experts or CRO specialists, which is why I'm trying to avoid all of that and trying to bring, for example, here at Farfetch, the perspective is that everybody is an experimenter. Everybody is a person that has that perspective of iterating and basically applying the scientific method on how they are building their products, but not just their products. And that's why I feel that this, and actually it's part of one of my training sessions, and where I even gave a couple of talks about this, is because when I see experimentation, for me, again, like I said, is this cultural shift in terms of how do you perceive something. And that thing, even when I gave one of my ridiculous examples, it's like when you are trying to toast and see that your toaster doesn't work, and now what you are doing with it, like, let's try something, but first you need to hypothesize around it. It's nowadays almost a canonical example that
Yeah.
everybody uses. But the reality is that we can apply that to our real life, to our own personal life, to everything that we are doing. And one great example that we also have here that on doing that is that we have been applying experimentation not necessarily just for the product development teams. We have been working, for example, with our engineering teams directly on how they perceive and evolve their processes. Or even more interesting, for example, with our HR department, where they have been applying even this iterative process on how they are doing things to make it more improvements and create hypothesis-based approaches. And that has been like, wow, eye-opening, because for them, because it has brought them like, whoa, so we can do all these agile thinking. And of course, those are just toolings and methodologies on how to apply these experimental mindset. And the reality is that we can apply all of that. And going back to what you said in terms of the difference between starting on the business experimentation, it's exactly the same. Again, when we are launching a company, when we have an idea, first, again, we do this in an iterative process, right? We don't go and build in our basement a tool, an entire tool, or
Yeah.
entire business. We will do it iteratively. We create a concept, a pitch deck. We go and validate it with the peers. We validate it with investors. All those iterative learning processes are based on hypotheses, and that's actually something that I even applied on in reality when, for example, here also I've been also try to work as a mentor for many startups, so trying to give back what I learned with the community. And in one of those programs, one that actually started here also in Dream Assembly at Farfetch, which was an incubator for fashion tech companies, I worked directly with them, and I was giving them a module specifically about experimentation. And I saw, because most of the times they would say, "Oh, but why are we doing this?" Because experimentation, it's basically doing A/B tests, and we don't have scale for that. We don't even
Yeah.
have clients. So why are we talking about these now? And I told them, after explaining all the process, the realization was, wow, actually we can apply this, because experimentation, again, it's the mindset. And then it's all about knowing all the different tools that we have on our tool belt, using user research, usability testing, user research, all the A/B tests, but also quasi experiments, all the tools that we have on our belt. Knowing what are the limitations, what are the pros and cons of using each one, when is the right moment. Not always applying blindly just one recipe to actually get to a final result, which is what most of people, even new joiners that I have, even new product managers that come to me, they are most of the time formatted already with that perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what I always try to break. And when I'm successful on that, me, my team together, actually it's like eye opener for everybody. So again, long answer to your question. The business experimentation is exactly, in terms of goals and approach, exactly the same as doing a change on a button or a change on a position or a label. And we should look at it from the same perspective. So, yeah, actually, that was actually where what helped me also was trying to apply this mindset and approach on those early processes. And actually, those learnings, that's what I'm bringing now to a more specific and sometimes more optimization oriented approach, where, of course, this product development requires.
Nice. No, super interesting. I mean, so you're talking a lot about experimentation is much larger, of course, than A/B testing, and you can use so many
Yes.
different methods. Could you give actually a definition of experimentation?
Hmm. Well, uh, a definition. I always actually start with one that is a bit controversial, and many people actually, it's normally a good conversation starter. But for me, experimentation equals product management or product development, to be more accurate. And why I'm saying this, of course, in this context, and of course, this goes against what I was saying, which is experimentation can apply to everything, but most of us, probably that are the audience of this chat, are creating something, are working around the product, and I use it most of the times as a conversation started, and most of the times the answer is, "Oh, why experimentation equals product development?" Um, First, to say that experimentation doesn't apply to project management. So, just doing and applying experimentation on something that has already a deadline and it will finish there doesn't make sense, right? Second, it requires something that is product driven, something that will have a life cycle, a continuous life cycle along the way. Second, it's more about, okay, this is not necessarily something that applies. And of course, product management or in product development, it's much more than that. I agree. But it's mainly that when we think experimentation about the tools that we will be, or the approach or the methods that we will be using. And again, if we look at it from that perspective, more holistic perspective, that experimentation is a way of thinking, yeah, it can we can correlate there. But it's a good provocation that I even do to some of my stakeholders. It's That's exactly what we are trying to do, and we cannot separate it from the regular product practices. And that's why actually experimentation is part of all the product ops perspective, etc. So yeah, if I had to put one that is controversial, yes, experimentation equals product development.
I think that answer scares me a little bit. I think I came to the same conclusion, but for the past, I think maybe a few months, I've been trying to block that thought from my mind because I've been a lot in conflict with product teams,
Hmm.
trying to empower them with experimentation, and quite often in a company. Let me give you a bit of a history, and then I'll tell you why I agree with you. Quite often, I feel like I've implemented probably I started actually experimentation program in over like 30 companies, either because I used to be at Optimizely, so I sold the tool and helped them, implement it, or because I worked as an agency, just implementing or creating experimentation program. And quite often you start with a company because they acquired the tool. In most cases, it's that you've seen it, I guess, with Optimizing maybe in the past. Usually, the management decide to begin experimentation. I'm not saying it's the best way to do it. I'm just saying that's what happened in most cases. So they invest in the tool and then they invest with one person probably around the tool to kind of
Yeah.
manage CRO, A/B testing, experimentation. And usually it's an entity on its own, right? Sometimes it's with product analytics, sometimes with marketing, sometimes with product, but it's never within product. I mean, I've never seen a product owner starting it and actually developing it. And with time, it becomes an entity of its own, and it's quite often challenging the roadmap of product rather than working with product. And I guess it happened to me quite recently where we started creating some kind of two teams, one roadmap with experimentation and one roadmap with products, which is not so healthy. And then so I started to kind of block myself of thinking that experimentation was product management because I was trying to be maybe so different from them, thinking that product management is 100% on delivery. But then I don't remember where I read that. I read something along the lines of experimentation is not something you do, it's how you do things. And and when I heard that, that's when I realized that, well, actually, if it's truly how you do things, and product management is kind of how you build your product, I guess experimentation equals product management. But I feel like as an experimenter myself, it's a hard pill to swallow. I guess I don't know why, but
It is.
yeah.
It is definitely, and of course, I always challenge myself. But anytime that I try to do it, and and the conversations that I'm having bring me to exactly the same conclusion that you also had and that I'm having is on our world, on what we are doing, we cannot disassociate product management from these exact practices. Otherwise, you are not doing it well. Probably you are doing something else with a wrong title or a wrong assumption. But if you are not actually applying these principles on everything that you are doing, yeah, what I realize is that it's not the case. And we also have the big examples on the industry, right? The big successful companies, most of them actually, when they say it's, they embraced experimentation from moment zero. The big ones, the most successful ones, right? I don't need to name them, but most of them, the Microsofts, the Netflix, the Airbnbs, the
Yeah.
Netflix, all of those, right? Why? And when asked, Amazon's, even if we don't like many of the things that they do or the aspects that they do, but experimentation is core for their business, core on the evaluation of new ideas, core in the evaluation of how to perceive that. Some may say, okay, but experimenting everything can be wrong because from the user perspective, because you are testing, you are using guinea pigs for your customers, looking at them as guinea pigs. But that is not. That is also applying the principle in the wrong way. It's using again the same tools, but in the wrong way, because it's all about being customer focused, also in terms of objectives, and that connects with what are the goals of how we are doing things, right? Um, Using the same thing with running a CRO program. Most of them are all about, again, and that's why, for example, I don't like at all the concept of CRO because it's focusing on a metric, and it's a metric that it's a business oriented metric, conversion, right?
Yeah.
Why? This is the wrong principle. We are doing things to create a better product. What is the definition of a better product? It's a product that users like, engage, uh,
Yeah.
also to the others that it's great, so they are advocates on their own for their product, and ultimately by being so engaged with, and so have such a fulfillment when they are engaging with such a product, that's what leads to all the positive business outcomes. But it should
Yeah.
be always with that mindset and not the opposite. So
Yeah.
again, some of these big companies actually apply these principles of experimentation really well. Some in more gray area uh, ways. And yes, I think that everybody agreed that some didn't do it well. But if we apply the same concept with the right objectives, which is being customer obsessed more than customer focused,
Yeah.
I think it will lead always to a very positive outcome. Again, positive from a customer perspective, starting there, but ultimately it will lead to the actual business results, which it's what's paying our bills, right? Our so but we cannot shortcut it because most of the times, if I'm not going to say 100% of the times, when we put the business first and we forget about the customers, it will be a bad play. And again, it's not being a product driven mindset, right? It's not about creating the right product in the right way. It's again probably just running a business. And sometimes we need to do those shortcuts.
Yeah.
It's life. It's how it is, but we should be aware when we are doing that on purpose. And that's also one of the principles of experimentation, right? It's taking a conscious approach on that hypothesis and let's test it if it works, even if it's against all the principles, for example, but knowing that and then recognizing that it failed and learn from it. So even when trying to do those types of things, if we do it on the right way, I think we will be getting to a better place at the end.
Agreed, totally. There's something similar that I've heard. So for a long time, I understood quite early that we shouldn't focus on revenue, but I was struggling to find a metric that could replace revenue. And I would love
Mhm.
to have your opinion on what we should look at. And quite recently, I was listening to a podcast. I think it's Alex Friedman. I don't know if have you ever heard of Mr. Beast?
Yes, of
Yeah, on
course.
YouTube. Yeah. So he was interviewed by Alex Friedman, and
Yes.
basically Alex was asking him, well, what kind of metric are you looking at to grow your YouTube videos? And he said he got inspired from something he heard from Elon Musk. He didn't know if it was really true, but I thought he resonated quite well in our world. They're not trying to look at revenue, so him he doesn't look at how much money his video are making, or he thought Elon Musk at Twitter wasn't looking at how much Twitter was making, but they're actually looking at disappointment of users, and they're
Yes.
trying to decrease that disappointment metric. So disappointment can be, a complex metrics based on maybe NPS or feedbacks, or maybe the website being slow or down. But actually, and to me, it actually made total sense. And I'm still trying to crack the thing on what that metric could look like for an e-commerce, etc. But I've been trying to kind of create that kind of metric recently on how can I measure the disappointment of my users whenever they come to, for example, my booking funnel, and how can I reduce it. And I thought it was a cool metric instead of looking at just revenue, like you mentioned. Or sometimes I was taking before the example of, if you built a chair, you're not going to look at the chair, see if it's successful by looking at how much, how many chair you sold. More like, oh no, how comfortable it is, or how many times people like to sit on it, etc., etc. But yeah, I would love to have your opinion on it. What kind of metric are you looking at? And especially, you said you now kind of the head of a center of excellence. Lots of people are not building an center of excellence, but more they're looking at experimentation as a tool, like you said, to grow. What's your north star, or what success look like for you?
Yeah. And I actually use the right keyword there. It's following a North Star, or having a single North Star on your company. That's actually one of the goals to achieve what we are discussing here. The principles of a North Star, and if we apply some of the principles on defining, and now, again, there are many definitions of what means a North Star, but I'll give you mine. A North Star should be, again, a consumer focused leading indicator of a behavior. And that already tells you everything. It doesn't replace all the internal performance business metrics and KPIs that we should continue using for different purposes, but it's a tool that will lead you, again, a leading indicator of the success from a customer perspective. The way that we should look at it is, again, it's not going to be appearing on our reports, for example, being a public company, right? But it's the way that we use to define where we focusing our strategy. It's actually what is going to define our strategy. It's what is going to actually design why we are doing some of the things and not others. So again, we can use it. We should use it as a prioritization tool, not necessarily as a KPI or a performance-based metric. So that's for me again the definition. Then there are many methods, frameworks on how to design it, how can it be applied. I highly suggest the North Star Playbook from John Kettleman. So it's basically the best approach that I've been seeing on that, because it puts it very clearly the North Star, all the input metrics, and how all the input metrics are supporting and how are connecting on the actual day to day, the daily drivers to go to those input metrics. And I think that what you mentioned, and I can give you an example that is not ours, for example, to start Netflix. Everybody talks about Netflix nowadays, not so well, but and I believe that actually a couple of years ago they're North Star, and actually from what I've been hearing, most probably changed with the new leadership, etc. This changed, and I'm almost betting that this is one of the reasons why they are struggling.
Yeah.
But a couple of years ago, it was public that their North Star was actually a ratio. And normally, a good metric is a ratio of the quality of time that the users were having on seeing a specific content. And what was mean that was basically it was not the number of times or number of views on something. They were actually measuring the success, and the success was they had to see at least more than 80%, I believe that was the number, 80% of the content, meaning that yes, they got so engaged that they are seeing it entirely. And that is what drives the strategy. That is what drives making sure that you have what is the right product in terms of what could be the options to be given to the user to make sure, like, continuously at the end of an episode actually trigger immediately the start of the next episode, etc., or to create binge watching, which they also invented the concept, right?
Yeah.
About dropping an entire season immediately, because that was driving towards that objective. That's what drove their strategy on actually create their own content, because they had to have control over the content that they were creating in quality but in quantity also. That drove an entire strategy, because being customer obsessed with something that was a metric, that it was not the subscriptions, it was not the guys that were paying. Ultimately it was all about that, in terms of the success of the ones that they got engaged over the success of doing something that was very positive from a customer perspective, which was, yes, I'm actually seeing more things until the end, right? So of course, if they had like content that they would just start and drop immediately, that was bad on their metric. And I think we can also look at e-commerce with similar concepts, right? When we are on e-commerce, we are all about what is from a customer perspective. Of course, this changes from each of the businesses, but if we apply the same concept, it's at the end, an e-commerce, it's trying to pursue a need that it's from the customers. That's why they are getting to you, and it's all about achieving that need in the most frictionless perspective and in the most satisfactory one at the same time, in a way that they will see increase the trust on the system, that they will come back, and that's the business outcome. But ultimately it's all about removing this friction and increasing the satisfaction on the entire process, right? It's not just about having the cheapest prices, it's not all about having the fastest shipping, it's not about having the most beautiful experience. It's the conjunction of all of that that can drive that value. And most of the times that's something that it's reflected on the engagement of the users, or how they are being the advocates of such a brand. And that for me could be an interesting North Star that could be applied, for example, to an e-commerce brand. That's why you have such big brands like Nike, Adidas, that where the success, it's not about selling shoes, trainers, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the perception that people anywhere have about, for example, the connection with the being healthier, with being more proactive. And those are the goals that they are not just marketing buzzwords, but they are actually applied on how they are designing their entire product. So the North Star needs to reflect that, needs to be a single one on the entire company. We can discuss sometimes on bigger, more verticalized companies, but most of the times it's just a single one that creates the focus from the different areas to be all together working towards a goal. And actually, this is for you to see here at Farfetch. We even have one of our values. It's Todos Juntos. It's a Portuguese one, actually, on purpose, because it means all together, and all together basically achieving the same goals that we are doing. And that's why, for example, applying these principles, it's a key aspect. Then finding the right metric, the one that will lead you. Yes, maybe it's the right metric for this moment for your company, and the one that we agree, and let's focus on that one for the next 2, 3, 4 years. That's good. probably in 2 years we will be rethinking what should be the next one. But at least it will be one, again, customer focused, a leading indicator for the success of that will lead then and should be supported by all the business KPIs. But that should be a customer oriented metric.
I mean, here we're talking about really new concepts. I feel like, especially coming from the Googles, the Amazon. So those strategies are maybe like 20 years old.
Right.
Do you think so? So, for example, Farfetch is a fairly new company, I guess extremely tech focused, we could say. Do you think it's old companies, old brick and mortars company that still exist that are like 40, 50 years plus? Do you think it's possible for them to adapt to those strategies, or do you know any that have been able to transition to these mindsets? What do you think?
I think it's possible. Again, I have seen and had good conversations with some big, and for example, the luxury world. It's a good example of old companies that are very traditional, most of the time family based, around, and that they have always worked on the physical world. The luxury, for example, it's only right now scratching the surface on the digital e-commerce, right? And I think that has been one of the the examples of one of the great successes of Farfetch has been exactly tapping on that, helping those brands to know to tell them actually what could happen if they changed. And we have seen a couple of successful changes that are currently our partners, right? So, yes, it's possible when you have the right support, when you have the right stakeholders working on those companies, and when you have somebody that is actually guiding them on how to apply those principles. So, I'm not saying that it's easy. Changing mentalities, definitely not, especially when you have already a business that it's working. So, changing it, doing the digital transformation, it's not easy, but it can happen. Another example, even I know very well Lucas, probably you, right? So from Booking, and he moved to a company like Vista, right?
Yeah.
Right now it's called Vista. That was a very old school company. They were printing like a competitor of Hallmark, and they were just printing physical brochures and congratulation cards and they saw an opportunity to actually change to the digital world, and they created an entire they went and they brought the best probably some of the best to actually do that change, but it had to start with an actual trigger from somebody
Yeah.
on the leadership of those companies to understand, yes, we need to change, yes, we need to do it, and let's do it in the right way. So it's possible. Again, not an easy task, but as anything, any type of change management, it's probably one of the areas where there are more books talking about change management, and probably none of them are correct because there is no right answer on how to change people's mentalities. But ultimately, it's all about having strong leadership and following a good uh, method or perspective and again, that's why experimentation, when enters on a company on the right way, it can be really transformational.
Agreed. No, totally. I mean, we talked a lot about a culture of experimentation. I would love to get a bit of your knowledge on the technology side of things.
Mm.
You guys, the last time we spoke, I thought you were super advanced. Could you tell me a bit more about your history with the A/B testing tools, if we can call it
Okay.
like this? You know, I think you've done some injection JavaScript, you've done some server side, you've
Yeah.
done now your own tool. Could you
Hmm.
tell me a bit about this experience?
Yeah, of course, of course. Um, so yeah, focusing right now on A/B testing. So the tool itself,
Yeah.
because of course it complements everything else that we also have. And that's actually one of the biggest assets that we have. We have a big user research team, a product design team that is highly engaged on applying many of these methods. But then also a product team that actually also supports the creation of cheap and fast experiments that are not necessarily always A/B tests. So all of that, it's part of the package, and it's very important to be there. Otherwise, it will not work, even if we have the top line A/B testing tool. So I wanted to give that disclaimer because I think it's very, very important. Now, talking about the actual tool set for A/B testing, it's exactly what you mentioned. So we actually started with code injection, with a server-side testing, where we are right now, where I believe it's the future. And but actually, our story started a bit backwards. Being a tech company, actually, instead of relying immediately on going to a third-party vendor, using one of the world leaders on that, which most of the companies, that's the basic rationale. It's like, let's not build and reinvent the wheel and just take the learning from it. Earnings and learnings, actually. We actually, being a very tech-oriented company, because again, Farfetch, it's not a marketplace. It's not just the
Yeah.
place where you go to buy luxury items. We are building the global platform for luxury. And it's basically that. We are like the Amazons for luxury. We are creating an entire ecosystem, technology platform from A to Z. It's not just the e-commerce part. It starts from everything, right? From product management, the order catalogs, inventory, shooting, uh, payment methods, logistics, fraud
Oh,
analysis
okay.
system. So basically, the entire suite
Yeah.
that we are offering as part of our Farfetch platform services. And Farfetch.com is just an example of it. But we are opening, and we have opened this platform for many others, many other big luxury clients and brands and other potential marketplaces that you probably have heard on the news. But so being a very tech oriented company, what led us was, okay, even not at the beginning, we need to do experimentation, we need to do A/B testing. How can we do it? Let's build it. And to be honest, building a basic A/B testing system, it's something that if you have a couple of engineers and somebody that knows statistics, can be done very easily. Not something that is super sophisticated, but the basics are very fundamental. It's very simple. You need to do the splitting. You need to do a place where you have all your setup and configurations. You need to have a proper metric system to capture all those events, and now you need to do some statistical analysis on top of it. Even if you do you apply the most basic, and that's where we started. That's what we called the FABS 1.0 version. FABS is, by the way, it's the name of our experimentation
Yeah.
platform. And this was even before I joined Farfetch, for you to see. So it was something driven mainly by engineering, the need to support to do that, plus support from data analysts and some data scientists, and it was built, that solution, internally. Then when I joined and I saw an opportunity, okay, we need also to leverage and to provide tools to also to support rapid iteration. Not, as we all know, probably, if not, but whenever that you have an engineer that needs to deploy something to deliver value, it has a bigger cost sometimes. And most of the times, most of the changes and most of the optimizations that the teams sometimes need, for example, the marketing teams need, they are mainly optimizations. And those optimizations tend to be mainly around content testing or content optimization in terms of the containers of that content, like
Yeah.
colors, banners, positions, the actual content itself. And the opportunity there was, okay, because doing those tests multiple times, many times, it was consuming time consuming for the team, so costly, and the opportunity for them to focus on other stuff. So I brought Optimizely on board as a tool actually to support that perspective, but always with a vision that I already had around building and investing on our own experimentation platform. Again, we were a platform, we were not just an e-commerce player. So we were going to build something, another module as part of the offer from our Farfetch platform services, and experimentation should be one of those. So basically, having all those integrations there would be needed. So that was a strategic for us to invest on our own experimentation platform. And that also, with the time, so basically when we did that integration, even when using a third party like Optimizely, we did it always in a sense that everything was deeply integrated, but still managed by Fabs. So Fabs was the experimentation platform. We had our event tracking system, our own, which we actually implemented to allow us to, for example, not take to use the limitations from the normal ones that are external. Lots of limitations nowadays with the cookies,
Yeah.
being able to be truly omni-channel, because we use exactly the same system even when we are on the store floor, on the apps, on the websites. For the different tenants, we use a single system to capture all of that information. And that also, in terms of our platform, we have built our platform in the sense that it's fully multi-tenant, etc. Something that most of the third-party players don't support. So even that integration, we used Fabs always as the connecting glue for all of that. So even all the different integrations that we had internally with the other modules were always done with Fabs, meaning that at any moment in time, we could replace it or evolve it with a different third-party player or with an in-house solution, which has been where we have been focusing and where we have been doing most of that investment. But at the same time, taking the leverage of knowing and learning, and it's always a win-win situation when we partner with somebody like Optimizely, and that has been very, very fruitful in terms of the learnings, because we accelerated even knowing which features were mostly used, which were most relevant for us and not necessarily for the others, and also to identify the gaps of some things that were not necessarily done in the best way possible, and that we've even helped to give hints and suggestions even to the roadmap from those tools, right? So I think it's always a win-win situation when we learn and we also give that feedback so they can evolve and keep evolving their tool. And if at some point they have something that it's better than what we have right now, let's use them again and let's continue the partnership. So I think it's always a very healthy way of doing these types of work, and not just from a let's take the advantage of them. No, it was not never that perspective. And that led us to where we are right now, because we have been evolving, and at some point we took the decision, but is the code injection a solution that it's scalable and it's sustainable for us? And we realized that no, right now it's not. So it took so a couple of years ago it was definitely really helpful and it accelerated a lot our program, but right now it's not helping. We came to a point that our business, in terms of scale, complexity, from an engineering perspective, is so high that it's very difficult to keep yours, even from a simple concept. So the code injection, for the ones that don't know, right? The code injection basically it's take the DOM of the HTML from a website and basically manipulates that to achieve the changes that we are trying to test. That implies lots of assumptions. One of them being that the website needs to be completely static, cannot change during the entire period that is running. And that seems something easy and can be applied when you are running a small company, or when you have a website that doesn't change much. But when you have as many product teams actively working as us and changing every single day, multiple areas with many deploys continuously happening, this becomes very tricky and to sustain, and it became a blocker for most of our evolution. So we had also, there is a performance penalty that even if it's mitigated on trying, it's there are techniques to mitigate it as much as possible. Still, there is a big cost in terms of performance hit
Yeah.
that these tools have. So we need also to take that in account. So we came to the conclusion that yes, it makes more sense for us to focus on a server-side only approach. But more than an actual server-side only approach for A/B testing, we took the other next step, which I believe that's actually where everybody needs to be. It's a feature toggle-based experimentation platform, meaning that, and that's why we evolved and created our own feature toggling system and
Yeah.
baked it inside the experimentation platform, deeply integrated. And now it's the way that any engineering team delivers their code. Feature toggling system, for the ones that don't know, has a simple concept. It's separating the feature deployment from the feature activation, meaning that when you normally do, it's you have your engineers, they create something, and the moment that they put it live, it will be available, done for everybody.
Yeah.
If you are actually able to decouple these two things, now you can have something that you can continuously deploy in live, but now you have a system that actually can control who and when sees what. So if you have that, and you can do that targeting in a personalized manner, meaning that you can do it for you and it's different for me. Now you have a system that if you connect it with an actual A/B testing system, like we do, now you have all your code, your pieces of code that can be controlled, and you can have the total control of, again, who sees what when, and you can control these, again, not just from an A/B testing perspective, but also from a release management perspective. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And that has been also a great perspective from the engineering teams, because now they see that not as an extra burden that they need to build on top, and that will create lots of spaghetti code because of having the multiple versions of the code that they need to maintain while the test is happening. And at the end, they will need to clean it up. No, now they will provide different features. Those features are fully encapsulated under a remote feature toggle.
Yeah.
And those features can be self-contained. They can continue. They can be still temporary, and at the end simply drop them, or they can become permanent. And now you have a system that you can even control in the future if used like use cases like kill switches, like for example a very famous one. Apple had they have been using this approach for many years, and they had like a security attack on iMessage that became quite famous. And because they had a fully integrated feature toggling system, they were able in minutes to actually disable that feature in a graceful manner on all the different clients that they had
Yeah.
on everywhere in the world. So that is, by even from a release management, code deployment perspective, continuous integration perspective, very good. And that was an actual great trigger to bring all the engineering teams on board. And now the excuse of taking longer, being riskier, it's no more. And actually, they are the ones that pull and use that. So I always call these as being my Trojan horse for the success of experimentation, because now I have them on my side, because I provide them a tool that it makes their life easier and removes any references of experimentation from their code, which is great. And now also, we also invested on another part that is crucial, which is our own statistical engine. So we have even implemented our own statistical engine. So like I said, we also have our own events tracking system. We call it Omni Tracking. And on top of that, we have built our statistical engine, which has support for multiple models, frequentist, Bayesians, um, and we adapt and we offer all those things to the users as they see fit. And basically, all that has led us to support much more control on the learning that we get from the test, because most of the times people just focus on the build of the experiment, then launch it, and then at the end it's just, okay, I want this metric to increase, more clicks on this button because I made it bigger. Okay, of course, if you
Yeah.
make it bigger, it will always have more clicks. The question is all the secondary effects. Is this helping everybody? Which is another very important question. And that is something that we invested a lot. It's what we call the automated deep dives, meaning that we can understand for each experiment, for each of the different metrics, what is actually happening for the different segments of the users that we have on the website, and identify very clearly the different dimensions, as we call them, those different dimensions, what's happening. It's basically like a drill down for each of the metrics very deeply, and understanding, is this actually helping this segment and not helping another? This is great, for example, to learn. I'll give you an example of how this is so powerful. At some time, we had a test that was becoming inconclusive. Then we were like, okay, what's happening on this test? It was a test that we rolled out globally. And at some point, we realized that one of the dimensions, it was the Spanish customers, Spanish in
Yeah.
terms of language, so not necessarily the country, that were having a negative, clearly negative impact. But overall, it was still inconclusive. But we're like, what? Why all these super negative, like all the others still inconclusive, but this one very negative? We went there. What is the common thing between all those languages, all those users on those segments? And actually, we realized something quite insightful. There was a bug, a translation bug. One of the strings that was actually affecting the Spanish language, the translation string was not done, and of course the users were seeing just some codes there instead of the actual label. And this was just a one simple example in terms of risk management on how we did this, but also trying to understand also the potential learnings in terms of personalization, meaning that we have learned so many times that, okay, we have some, because we have our access program in terms of loyalty, and we can also try to understand what is the effect of these different tiers for the different users on the different programs on something. And we learn, and that's just another example of segmentation that we use. And we can try to understand what's happening with those users and try to see, oh, maybe this is great for users that are more frequent buyers, users that are frequent visitors, but they are not frequent buyers, so it's a different segment of users in terms of behavior. And trying to understand that, yes, maybe this is great for those but not good for the others. So maybe this creates an opportunity that we say, this feature, instead of rolling it out for everybody, no, we simply go without any type of extra code deployment, any extra involvement from the engineering teams. We simply go to our feature toggling system, because it's not just an on and off system. We can actually control there who is seeing what from on that feature. We can simply go there and say, okay, now it's not for everybody, it's simply just for the high tier users. Done. And we took all those earnings and stopped the mitigation on all the other areas. So yeah, that's where we are, and we have been. I still think that we are on what I like to call an MVP of our experimentation platform, because we touched on all the areas. Still lots to evolve to make it better. But yeah, that's where we are right now.
I'm so jealous of your tech stack. You have the best like playground ever. But it's funny. So if I go back to, because you said so many interesting things. If I go back to the first point, I would say hybrid, having this injection JavaScript and server-side testing capacity. I was talking to a really large taxi, let's say, company, and themselves as well, they're using both. So actually, yeah, on their product, they're definitely using only server-side. But for the marketing pages, they kept a tool because for them, it was easier to do via injection JavaScript. So anything that was a landing page, like you mentioned, that is static, they thought it was much easier to use, for example, a Google Optimize or an Optimizely because, well, for marketers, it was much easier. They just changed in text, etc. But so they use a similar model to you. So super interesting. So did you say your experimentation platform is connected to your event platform, or it's actually the same tool?
So it's technically it's not the same tool, but even those three services that I mentioned, they are different. The feature toggling, the fabs, and the stats engine, and then we all have omni tracking. But ultimately, they are all a part of the same package. Let's call it that way. When we offer it to our clients. But there is one thing that I forgot to mention, which is also where we are actually working right now and where we have been doing great evolutions, which is on that part for the marketing teams. Most of the times, those marketing teams, like you said, they want to go there, they want to change, they want to optimize. They don't want to change the actual structure of the website. That's what the product teams will do. That's how they are doing all the iterative tests in terms of usability, trying to get to a point that this is much better for all the users or for some of them. But most of the marketing teams, what they are focused on is on creating more engagement and revisits, right? So it's all about making sure that whatever content that it's there, it's engaging enough and appealing enough, and which is the one that is more direct and more tailored for those users. And that means that those types of experiments, they are basically always the same. So what we saw was, okay, we have the engineering team always doing that. We have all those code injections tools doing those tricky changes, creating potentially flickers sometimes if it's not well set up, or with those code injection tools, or having all those performance penalties. But most of the times it was always the same. Even the engineering teams that were setting up those tests, they had like templates already prepared to go there and just, okay, let's do this, and to accelerate the delivery of those changes. So we came to the conclusion, okay, if we have that, why cannot we automate at least those use cases directly on our content management system tools? And actually, we also have our own CMS. So we also have built our own CMS, not my team, but other teams. Even our messaging systems that control any type of message, promotional messages that are being triggered on the multiple channels, etc. So we saw, okay, we have here another opportunity, which is basically interconnecting directly with those other back office tools that we have, and provide automatic setup of experiments directly from there, especially from an optimization perspective, meaning that now they can compare one content to another version of that content. They can compare a different order of items to another order of items, which one works better, putting this content here or there. All that type of experiments that they were trying to rely on those rapid iteration tools, now they are even faster, because now they can simply go to a tool and say, yes, I want to compare this against that, against the other. Hopefully even sooner, we will even support optimization methods like multi-arm bandits, even in the future contextual multi-arm bandits that will even do these automatically for them. So all of that because we have been investing on our tool and try to understand what is, because I also try to apply the same principles that I'm always preaching to the others, which is I have been hearing my customers, my internal customers, and trying to understand what were their pain points, what were they doing that was repeatedly. And I have been always focusing my internal North Star just for the experimentation area on that. And for example, I can give you that my internal North Star is simple. Even if I'm not responsible for running all those experiments, I want to increase not just the number, because I don't believe on the number. It's also the quality and the cadence of experimentation. So what I'm trying is to increase the number of experiments per opportunity, including non-A/B tests, and that's my main goal. I want to increase. I want that every opportunity, our opportunities are our biggest. So any opportunity, a space of opportunity, may have multiple initiatives.
Yeah.
So what I want ultimately is that for each of these opportunities that are identified, and those are the ones part of our portfolio, we will have the most number of experiments focused on that specific opportunity. I don't
Yeah.
want to just, for example, increase the number of experiments widely, but then I only have like the marketing team running them. No, I want them to be spread. And I want not to also include just A/B tests. I want to include also all any type of experiments, and especially focusing on those there. So, and it's something that apparently I'm not able to control, but I can provide all the tools to make it easier. And ultimately, I will help them to achieve that goal that is mine also.
That's really cool. And have you ever thought of also maybe the looking at the size of experiments that are being run or the type of risk? Are you trying to increase, for example, any kind of test, or are you trying to create some kind of a portfolio, like a few big tests here? Do you see what I mean? Are you looking at
Yeah,
the risk that they're taking towards the business, or not so much?
yeah,
Because in some cases, when I looked at when I was trying to increase the volume of experiments. I was successfully doing so. However, the quality would decrease, and
yeah,
people would just be taking less and less risk. And then we would go for, let's say, 100, from 100 to 200 or 300 tests easily, but it would be only small tests, not moving the needle, etc. And so, have you ever looked at something like this, or have you ever had a similar situation?
yeah. Totally, I totally see and agree with you on that there is that risk. And
Mm.
yes, we have faced it. We have some teams that actually have that. They have been
Yeah,
running so many tests, but when we look at them, they are mainly optimizations. Like, no, what we need is actually you need to take the big risks. Actually, they are not risks, because we are, by doing this, we are mitigating that risk and anticipating and reducing that, and helping us to, for example, shift very quickly from one opportunity that we saw. We thought that it was huge from a business case perspective, and actually it became non-relevant for our customers. Therefore, that those assumptions that worked for other competitors doesn't apply to our customers.
yeah,
Uh, and that, for me, it's the best risk mitigation. Is not even starting to work on something that we don't see any indications that it's relevant, if it's not strategic, of course. So, of course, that is one of the key aspects. How I have been handling that, it's using a different perspective. It's actually, for example, my central experimentation team. What we have is we set up a set of tools, if we want to call them that, or ceremonies, where we challenge the teams early on their hypotheses. And when they come with those hypotheses that are merely optimizations, we ask them why. We ask them, do you have, but why don't you do it in different way? Have you validated this opportunity? What is the actual? So using the opportunity solution tree mapping from Teresa Turner's, right? Which is, I believe, one of the best tools that any product manager should have, in terms of, again, mindset, not the actual tool itself, right? Because it's just putting that on a chart, on a tree. But why are you doing this? If you haven't yet validated the bigger question and the other bigger question, focus there. And we challenge them on that. And when we do that to one, and they realize, and then we do it to another, and then we do it to another, most of the times they will not repeat it, and they will start doing it. So sometimes it's purely because, yeah, we have it. It's just a quick win that we have it here. And yes, why
yeah.
don't you run it? Yes, run it. It's simple, done. But have you done it that way? And they create it on the backlog, and now they will go and pursue it. So the same with whenever that we have an hypothesis ready, they come to a central peer review session where basically everything goes there, and to help in terms of the definition of success, in terms of the metrics that are being defined, making sure that it's not just about looking at that positive metric that they want, but all the secondaries, the guardrail metrics that exist, and giving that feedback in an open session, meaning that even that person, okay, learn, but also the others that were listening, they will remember even on the future that when they are preparing their other experiments that touched on a similar approach. The same with the test and learn sessions that we run monthly. When the tests finish, and basically we pick on at all those learnings about our customers, and we share it with everybody on the company, really everybody. So super wide session in terms of sharing. That also generates more potential better experiments. So I have been trying to tackle the quality, not from a quantity perspective, but actually from a practices perspective. So yeah.
Okay. And let's go for one last question. I attended an event last December in London, and there was a really good presentation from Net-a-Porter. Net-a-Porter was trying to also build a center of excellence,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking about the frustration that sometimes they could feel from, when you're trying to empower others to do experimentation. Sometimes you feel like you can do so much better than them because maybe you've run thousands, so you know the process of creating an hypothesis, doing the research, building, etc. Is that something that happens to you? Because while you're helping so many other people doing experimentation within your company, and if you have any frustrations, how do you deal with them?
Yeah. Of course, this is not everything is not pink. No, like I said, even on our platform, it's not ideal. We still have lots of space to grow. For example, in our latency from the moment that we have an event to the moment that we actually get all those insights, I need to shorten that. So I'm working with the engineering teams to make sure that we change our architecture to make it better. From a practices perspective, of course, it's frustrating when you have areas where there are top-down decisions that sometimes they come and they say, okay, now let's release this without even doing the testing. Of course, it's frustrating. But how I have been handling it, it's more basically looking at, again, our North Star, what we are trying to achieve, making sure that we try to learn from those things, that everybody agrees and understands that that decision was not based on the principles of experimentation. And especially the ones that fail, because normally when something fails while running the experimentation method, it's great, it's a celebration. But when something fails and it was not tested due to a decision, we need to try to make it very, very clear that that was a failure and it could have been prevented that way. And most of the times very easily, just because there was bad planning, for example, on how to put something in motion, because we have the tools there to support that. So I think using, again, even at least this learning opportunity of, okay, if we failed, now let's learn what we could have done better. And that's something that I try to focus a lot on how to do that. And then the rest is training, making sure that we have everybody aware of what can be done, what shouldn't be done, how can they do it better. Having this support network with all these ceremonies, with what we have, which is the Experimentation Ambassadors Network. It's basically people that are closer to their areas, that they know their challenges, and they are the ones that I connect with them more regularly to make sure that they are the first voice of support there on when those questions, when those challenges, when those top-down decisions come. Because most of the times what happens is that when they come to, for example, to me, most of the times it's already too late, right? So if I was able to, by creating this network of having people that are close to the actual areas, that can immediately influence that. So that is where I've been betting on how to support and create a better experimentation and center of excellence. Again, center of excellence, it's not a silo number of people that they will knock on our door. We also try to to have this same principle spread like an octopus, making sure that we are closer to all the different areas, and that we are there again not to validate, that we don't want to be at the process to validate everything that is being done, or how it should be done. But even when people fail, so we need to provide the freedom for people to take mistakes. And if they do and take those mistakes by using the right tools to support those that process, they will learn. They will feel even more empowered to take bigger risks. Otherwise, and start pushing against those bad decisions of just rolling out something without testing. And they will be their our own experimentation network even broader, and that's basically my ultimate goal, to make this succeed. But yeah, it's nothing is pink. Nobody that tells you that they have the perfect program has it. Nobody that tells you that they have the perfect implementation platform, they don't have it. But it's about, again, all summarizes to the beginning. It's all about keeping the mindset. And experimentation, it's a mindset, not a tool.
That's a great sentence to finish that podcast. Thank you so much, Luís. It was so insightful. Even personally, learned so much. Was really good. Really could feel the passion as usual, and the knowledge.
No, thank you, and definitely was a pleasure. And thank you for inviting me here. And yeah, anybody that feels that this content is relevant, yeah, ping me, connect with me, ask me questions. That's what I love. It's I think product in general, it's all about this knowledge share, because we don't have secret sauces. Nobody has them. So it's all about, we learn from each other, and that's what my passion comes from there. So yeah, thanks Alex for inviting me again.
Thanks.